So at this time, I'd like to turn over the program to Rachel Flum, who is the Executive Director of the Economic Progress Institute. Rachel, take it away.
Thank you, George, and I'm pleased to be with this distinguished panel today. As George mentioned, we're all here around a piece of legislation that we think is so important for our state. Senator Murray and Rep. Alzate have introduced this legislation this year that would add one new tax bracket for the top 1% of earners at a marginal rate of 8.99%, which would replace the current top rate of 5.99%. This amount would only be for income above $475,000 and would only impact about 5,000 filers in the state. We estimate that this proposal will generate an estimated $128 million in new revenue that could be used to support our communities and help them heal and build back from this COVID pandemic. This is long-term funding that can help us better fund schools, public education, support our infrastructure, provide state funding to cities and towns, support a number of other things like veterans homes, programs for senior citizens, services for individuals living with developmental disabilities, early education programs, affordable housing, and more. As the data shows, if you earn less than $475,000, you are not impacted by this proposed change. If you make $500,000 under our proposal, you'll only have to pay an extra $750. And if you make $1 million a year, you'll have to pay an extra $15,700. To put that into perspective, the top 1% of Rhode Islanders have benefited the most from a number of federal and state income tax cuts over the past 2 decades, starting with the Bush tax cuts in the early 2000s to the Carcieri state tax cuts in 2010 to the Trump tax cuts in 2017, which alone saved the average top 1%er a whopping $35,000 per year. The reduction in personal income tax for the very wealthy has created a tax system in Rhode Island in which lower and middle class families pay a higher percentage of their income in total taxes than the wealthiest 1% when you factor in income tax, property tax, and sales tax. The poorest Rhode Islanders actually pay 50% more as a percentage of income than the wealthiest 1%. What's the result of all this? While the rich have gotten a lot richer, goods and services to support regular Rhode Islanders have been underfunded. Again, individuals and businesses who earn less than $475,000 will not be impacted. As you see here, most Rhode Islanders, in fact 99% of them, will still be taxed at the same current rates. As we all know, the COVID pandemic has exacerbated inequalities between those with wealth and power and everyone else even further, and has disproportionately harmed the working poor and people of color. Even though we expect federal support for this year's budget, this support will be short-term support and will not last long enough to ensure everyone is able to rebuild from this pandemic. Our state leaders have a moral obligation to respond to this crisis in a way that does not increase existing inequalities of race, ethnicity, gender, disability, and economic status. It is right that we look to the wealthiest first to contribute their fair share to help solve our long-term budget concerns. As this pie example shows clearly, the top 1% can afford to pay more, and we should ask them to do so. One counter argument that we often hear is that the rich will flee if we tax them more. But looking at the data, that claim just isn't backed up. Instead, a wealth of research demonstrates clearly that Rhode Islanders and people in general do not pick up and move easily. And if they do move, tax rates generally play only a marginal role in that decision to move. This proposal is very popular with Rhode Islanders. More than 2/3 of people polled last year said they supported the tax increase, and that was before the COVID crisis made the need even more urgent. So this proposal is data-driven, popular, and morally the right thing to do, and more states are enacting them. We'll hear from Carl Davis in a few minutes about how New Jersey and some other states are passing similar proposals, and we here in Rhode Island, it's our turn. We need to get this done this year. With that overview, I'll turn it back over to you, George.
Thanks, Rachel. That's a very comprehensive analysis, and I'm sure that information and slides would be available to people if they want to get them.